how was it going from aerospace, big aerospace company, pretty structured, bureaucratic, to the exact opposite, to like, hey, you're your own boss. I mean, you were doing the university stuff, so that kept some structure, but from a business operating perspective, how did you handle that?
It, yeah, not well. In reality, man, not well. I think I'm very process orientated. I always have been, um, and so far I've found myself spending so much time developing processes that I'm forgetting to remember that that's not necessarily going to be the thing that pays the bills, and so it is difficult knowing that you need to do a bit of all of it. What I am learning, and what I've been fortunate enough to experience at the university, is actually sometimes no process can work as long as you know what you're doing and how you're doing it, and you keep it small and you can be agile. And there's benefits in the lack of process. I so I guess I'm trying to be as adaptable as possible, so that in some conversations we need to make sure we've got every process under the sun ready to be written out and controlled and monitored and discussed. But in some cases, actually, um, part of the reason why things haven't developed is there is no agility in research. There's no, and that's an international flaw. That's inevitable with bureaucracy and processes and size of these organisations and the size of the pay packets that the DoD or the DOE or the UK equivalents are offering to universities and research centres. So I'm trying to be lean and light as possible in terms of our management of how we process, and trying to be a little bit more forward thinking in terms of the dynamicism that I expect of people to work with me or for me. But equally, in some cases, as soon as you then go back into those conversations with the big aerospace primes or the space, the existing kind of traditional space manufacturers, process is key. But I think maybe one for you to talk as well. You maybe have more experience, but the wave of startups, the space startups, the forward-thinking automotive startups who don't come from a background of SAE and ASTM specs as their traditional kind of start point. What do you think in terms of is that lack of process evident? Have you worked with any of those newer teams who are actually they're just doers? Is that a thing? It seems that way, but I've not actually experienced it.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a balance, I think. I think the harsh reality is that most people hate making decisions. And in a big company, it's easy to not make decisions, right? In a small
Yeah.
company, it's harder to do that. And so I think it leans towards more people that want to keep the ball rolling forward or keep the momentum. And often that's at the expense of things like standards and processes. And I think you can get away with that for a decent amount of time until you find a market, until you find the application. I think on the other end of the spectrum, it's really hard as a new business owner to go and say, like, I've got my 3 year plan of here's my business model, X, Y, and Z, right? Because no one can predict the future. Like, I think
No.
my biggest learning, or one of my biggest learnings, is I think the only good plan is a flexible plan, right? Like you could spend years making the perfect plan, but that doesn't exist. So if you can
Mm.
be flexible, that's I never wrote a business plan for anything that I've done. Like you kind of talk to people, you say, hey, like, do you need help with this? Or we see there's a software opportunity to do this, and you kind of try it. And the reason I like being a kind of independent small entity is I get to make the decision. I can say, hey, let's try it. And like this podcast, like if I'm in a big company, like the first thing they're gonna ask is like, oh, how many listens do you have? Like, what's your link? Like all the stuff, like the
Yeah.
metrics and things that, like, look, this isn't Joe Rogan, right? Like, I'm not getting 10 million people listening to someone. No offense, talk about additive, right?
Not yet. Never know.
But like that, you're looking at it like I think if you're in different environments, they look at it a different way than I would look at it in terms of longer term kind of opportunities and just trying stuff out and uh, getting conversations started.
Yeah, I like that. I think that kind of rings true with the lack of opportunity in some cases, or at least the promotion internally at large companies to just go and talk to people, I think is interesting. I spoke to we'll name drop. I spoke to the SDM yesterday. We was talking about the consortium, and we was talking about who the members of the consortium, the data consortium in particular. And I was talking to a former kind of opposition at GK when I was at Airbus, Martin White, who we're both British, and we talked about the lack of European entities on that list. And I think there's still a mentality in the UK and Europe to just let's not talk about it because this is our IP or this is our whatever, and the secret thing just doesn't work. And that's one thing I really like about small businesses, but I think even in some forward thinking businesses, let's just talk about it. Our process is probably our IP that gives us the leg up, that gives us the part quality, that gives us the reason why the big boys want to work with us. That's ours. We're keeping that. But let's talk about everything else because you can still talk without necessarily showing all your secrets. And that's one thing I found at the large companies is there's no promotion to talk. And there's one quote I always think of. There's always some exceptions to the rule in the big companies. The chief engineer on A350 Wing, he once said to me to make sure that once you've proven yourself, you then need to start making sure that you get ready to ask for forgiveness instead of permission. And progress is significantly better than panic. And I think that always rang true of me is just be the decision maker, make it based on facts. And I quite like a spreadsheet and I quite like some stats to back me up a little bit for confidence maybe or comfort, but just make a decision. And I think that's probably part of the reason why I'm here as a very, very small business owner. Let's make some decisions. They might not always be right, but let's make them based on what we think people are needing, what people are asking for, rather than what we don't know because we don't talk.
Be sure to check out our website, www.3degreescompany.com, for more content.